Everyone thinks they know what happened, but when you put the pieces side by side, the confessions, the footage, the letters, the silence, you realize we still don't know everything. This is everything we know to date about the Watts family murders, the facts, the lies, the timeline, and the questions that still haunt us, particularly me. I have a lot of questions about this case. Chris Watts has done a lot of sending out information to people, retracting it, saying it again, retracting it again. And I really want to get to the bottom of a lot of these theories, a lot of this false information that's being put out there. And I just want to know the truth. I just want to know everything that happened. And I think that's why this case is still so prevalent 7 years later, because it seems to be that Chris Watts is in the limelight and he loves it and he wants to keep himself there. So, out of respect for the family, for Shanann's family, for the girls, I'm not going to do too many more episodes on this case around Chris Watts. Only when we have some absolutely new information that's really going to rock my world in the way of telling me exactly what happened. So this episode is going to be all about what we know to date, for sure, what's fact, what's documented, and then we're going to dive into the questions that are haunting me. And what I'd really love to know from you guys is, what questions are haunting you? And do you know the answers to some of the questions that I am asking? So here's what we know so far. The timeline of events. Hang on, before we get into that, I just want to say that we do our research, we look up everything, we go by the facts, we go by what's out there, put out there by the police, by the law, by attorneys, FBI, all of the right channels is where we get our information. So just to let you know that information is what we collect, not just theories and observations. Also, please bear in mind that this episode will touch on sensitive topics that could possibly trigger some people. And if that's you, that's okay. Just take some time, pause, come back, or don't come back at all. It's up to you. And please take care of yourself. Your mind and your heart, your health is way more important than listening to the podcast. So if that's you, take some time and I will see you in the next video. In saying that, let's get into it. So the timeline of events, we know the timeline events. Okay, so the date, August 13th, 2018, at 1:48 a.m., Shannan, I should say, arrives home from her trip. And this was a girls' trip that she went on for work, the company that she was working for. It was a paid trip for team building, I think, things like that. So she had spent that weekend away from the girls, away from Chris, and it was a very sensitive time. We know that it was a very sensitive time for both of them, particularly Shannan, because she was struggling with what she was getting from her husband at the time. So we know for a fact via footage on the ring cam at the front door. And I have a lot of questions around that ring cam and that front door. So that was at 1:48 a.m. At between 2 and 4 a.m., we know that Shannan and possibly the girls, but Shannan came to the end of her life. We know that between 5:17 a.m. and 5:45 a.m., Chris backs his truck into the garage or to the beginning of the garage in front of Shannan's vehicle. And puts things in that to then go to the oil site, to his work. We know between 6:30 and between 6 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., Chris then drives to the oil site. Now, we know for sure through Chris Watt's actions and confessions that initially he blames Shanann for the children's unaliving. Then later he confesses that he actually unalived all 3 people. His prison letters have revealed that he attempted to smother the 2 young girls first in their beds separately prior to then unaliving Shanann. And then he also confesses in his prison letters that after he had finished doing what he did to Shanann, the girls woke up. They both woke up. They looked like they'd been through trauma. They looked like they had had something terrible happen to them. They were crying, asking what happened to their mother. That's his written word in his letters to Sherilyn or Cheryl Cadle. He also wrote in those letters that he waited until Shanann was drowsy from OxyContin. Then he proceeded to put his hands around her neck and take her life. He then drove the girls alive in the truck to the oil site. In his letters, he states that Bella asks if she'd suffer the same fate as Cece. Bella didn't fit into the tank properly, so he had to force her in, which caused bruising on her shoulder. And he says in his letters that he describes his feelings post unaliving his whole family as relief. He felt nothing at all, only relief. Okay, now we want to jump into what we know about his psychology. Okay, this is the making of a family annihilator. All right, so we know that Chris Watts exhibited traits consistent with a passive-aggressive personality type. He was described by his co-workers and friends as quiet, reserved, conflict avoidant, and he took on a lot of responsibilities himself in the job. He was an operator with Anadarko Oil Company, which means their term operator means that he was like a supervisor. So he would be the one that delegated everyone to do their jobs. However, Chris didn't really know how to do that, being that he was conflict avoidant and reserved and quiet, and a lot of the time he would do jobs himself, which is probably why alarms weren't raised or red flags weren't flown when he contacted his co-workers to try and figure out who was going to be at that oil site on Monday morning, because he offered to fix it himself, which he often did. So that was not out of the ordinary. So it didn't raise any concerns with his co-workers, at least. So he also has been known to have said that he harbors a lot of resentment towards Shanann for many years, particularly around his family estrangement and financial strain. So we know from certain reports that the couple were starting to have financial struggles, and they had been in bankruptcy once before, and it was looking like, this is from Chris, by the way. We don't know this for sure. This is what he's saying, that they were looking at maybe going into bankruptcy again. And it's unfortunate because we only have what's documented and Chris's word. We don't have a lot of information outside of their family and friends that don't really know. That it doesn't seem that they really knew the true ins and outs of, Shanann and Chris's intimate relationship. So anyway, back to what we know for sure. He reportedly felt overwhelmed by fatherhood in the last few weeks prior to the murders. He felt overwhelmed by the financial pressure, and he says that They were, as I said, facing possible bankruptcy for a second time, and he felt overwhelmed by his life with Nicole Kessinger, who we are going to call NK for this podcast because I am sick and tired of saying her name. That woman, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, and this is not the opinion of the show, this is not the opinion of anyone else, this is my personal opinion, I don't like this girl. I don't like her. I'm sorry, I don't like her. I think, look, none of us are angels, and we've all made mistakes. And sleeping with a married man is a mistake that a lot of people make. Okay. And that's okay, cool. But what has happened since her affair with this guy, we're going to call him CW because I'm sick of tired of saying his name as well, because he's just a piece of crap, in my opinion. So, anyway, NK has an affair with some married dude. They've in this whirlwind romance for however many months. Speculation says more than 2 months, but we don't know for sure. She's probably looking him up back in September because she had the hots for him. And eventually she gets to meet him and they start a romance. And I think she had I think by her looking him up, that was her way of looking at it. She probably thought he's hot because, like, let's face it, Chris Watts or CW, he was a good looking guy back then before we found out he was a monster, and that's probably why he's so popular with all the ladies and stuff writing him love letters because, he's a good looking dude. So, and in amongst all the dudes that work in the oil company, she probably found him the most attractive and she looked him up. And then eventually, as he comes into the office and stuff, she's flirting and eventually they kick it off, right? So I'm in my head, knowing how this sort of thing plays out, I reckon, they probably started seeing each other in February, May. But, that's my opinion. And the more I look into this case, the more, like, when someone, that old saying, when someone tells you something, like if someone tells you something and they're known to be a liar, either halve the number they tell you or double it. So I feel they've said they only started seeing each other in June. I got a feeling it was earlier than that. That's just my feeling. I feel like it was February. I feel like it was January, February, maybe March, because I feel like he was really focused on his weight and health around that time. And that was a big thing in their relationship. And yeah, anyway, that's just where my head goes with that whole thing. I think it was a much earlier interaction between those two. In his letters, he admitted to emotional detachment weeks before the murders and referred to being consumed by a dark presence. So we know for sure that Chris Watts, CW, has made bold claims in his letters from prison stating that he believes he was taken over by a dark presence. Okay, so get help. Talk about it. Tell someone. Anyway, the other thing we know about his psychology at the time, many experts classify him as a self-righteous and anomic family annihilator, someone who views his family as extensions of his identity and eliminates them when he feels his image or control is threatened. That's interesting. I would agree with that. So rather than seeking escape through divorce or transparency, he internalized guilt and failure, and that then converted all of those feelings into violence, like a ticking time bomb. He just blew. Although that ticking time bomb, that bomb that blew up, it actually took a while. It it was released in stages because we know that he planned this. This was not something that had happened. We know for sure that this was planned attack. This was something that he had planned to do, and I feel that he had been planning to do this. But when he actually executed his plan, he wasn't ready to. He executed the plan earlier than he actually wanted to because he agreed to go on a trip with Shanann the following weekend a romantic weekend getaway, just the two of them. I believe, in my head, I feel like he agreed to go on that trip. And that may have been when he was going to then take his plan and put it into action. And I believe that the night that he went out on the Saturday night on the weekend that Shanann was away and he had the babysitter there with the girls, instead of going to the game, he goes out with NK and then they spend the entire evening on the phone after that together. We know for sure that Shanann's phone, purse, suitcase and wedding ring were found downstairs. We know that her phone was in the couch, and we know that her wedding ring was on the bench. And I remember CW distinctly saying when he spoke about the wedding ring in the first body cam footage that she never took that ring off unless she was dyeing her hair. So when did she take that ring off? Her wedding rings. The odd things about this for me are Shanann was an avid Thrive member. That's a multi-level marketing company. Her entire business is on her phone. Her entire business is her phone. Contacting people, doing live streams, going on social media, promoting the product, promoting the lifestyle. So it is extremely unusual for someone that has that going on to ever really be without their phone. And she was going through so much. She was going through so much that weekend. There's no way that she would have left her phone on the couch. When she got home after being with the girls all weekend, how do you explain that? How do you explain she's been away all weekend with the girls? She's had a massive weekend of being sick, crying, talking to the girls about her relationship with her husband and how it's failing. She's been upset. She comes home at 1:48 a.m. and she goes upstairs and goes to bed. I kind of don't know if that's how that went down. I really don't feel like that's how it went down. And the evidence suggests that Shanann never made it upstairs. The only thing that trips me up on this is why was she only wearing her underwear and a t-shirt if she didn't make it upstairs? So that's the part that gets me. So did Shanann make it upstairs or not? We don't know for sure. That timeline bothers me a lot. What bothers me the most about that is that her phone was downstairs. It wasn't beside her bed. If she'd gone to bed, knowing what I know now about Shanann and having studied her behaviour and all the things, having studied all of her behaviour and all the things that she does or did for her business, and listening to the way that CW talks about her and her business and how she's so connected to things like her phone and whatever. For me, the red flags and the question marks hover over that interaction between 1:48 a.m. and the time of her passing. What went down? That's the biggest thing for me, because I think that is where there's a lot of misconception, a lot of misinformation, and a lot of lies directly coming from CW. In his letters from prison to Cheryl, he states that it all happened in their bedroom when she was in bed. Okay. He went to the girls first. He smothered them first, thinking they were gone. He went back into the room and then proceeded to unalive his wife. But I don't know if did they go to sleep or did they argue downstairs? Because in the book that his cellmate or next door neighbor in his cell block wrote, that he had gotten into it with Shanann as soon as she got home. So she gets home in the morning, he's still awake, and they get into a big argument and get into a fight downstairs as soon as she gets home, which makes sense because the canines that went through there did pick up on a struggle and a heat signature in the playroom downstairs, right next to the lounge room. So that could have happened. Anyway, let's move on to what else we know. The master bedroom showed no signs of struggle. So there was no signs of struggle downstairs, upstairs, or anywhere. CW claimed Shanann was in bed when he unalived her, but the lack of bedroom evidence and the location of her belongings do raise a lot of doubts. The security footage captured Chris backing the truck up to the garage and loading it. Slow. It was very slow. It was 35 minutes. Took him 35 minutes. What was he doing? What was he doing? What took him 35 minutes to load into the car? Did he unalive her just prior to that? Or was he getting her down the stairs? Like what? His story says that he had already brought Shanann down the stairs out of the bedroom and had laid her at the back door, wrapped in a sheet. Then he brought the truck up and then he loaded her in and he left. But it was 35 minutes. What was he doing? I never see in that footage any shadows or things large enough that he's putting in the back of the car unless he picked her up in a cradle way and put her in that way. I don't know. You do, however, see him picking up what looks like to be two small children, putting them in the vehicle. But I can't see any evidence and footage of him putting a body almost as big as himself inside that car. Okay, so there's just no visible dragging or heavy lifting in that footage, just the children. So law enforcement have recovered the blankets and toys near the burial site, which suggests a very disorganized disposal and emotional fatigue, which is what I was saying earlier about how I don't think this was as planned out as he had hoped it would be. I don't actually know if he was ever really truly planning to get rid of the girls or if that was what he thought he had to do because he had to do it while they were home. Keeping in mind that he was going on a trip with Shanann the weekend after, which I feel was his original plan to do what he was going to do with his wife. But that plan was brought forward because on the Saturday night, I feel like he was pushed. Maybe not deliberately by NK, but in his own mind, the way he thinks that he has to do this straight away. Like this is where his head has gone, because he's the annihilator. He's not, he's like, this has to, they all have to get out of my way and it has to be today. It was going to be next week, but it's today now. So I think that's brought up the timeline for him, which is why he was so fatigued by the time he actually moved all of the bodies to the oil site that he just was like, I'm done, and left everything where it was. Maybe he secretly wanted to get caught too, because sometimes this happens in the psychology of someone who does these things is that they do want someone to know what they've done. At the burial site, Shanann was found face down and she was wrapped loosely in a sheet. And her body was showing signs of post-mortem trauma. So what does that mean? Something happened to her after. We do know that her body over time did expel the fetus of Nico. So possibly that's what they're talking about. The girls were found in separate oil tanks. Bella had injuries consistent with her struggling. She had missing frenulum in her mouth. That's the skin between the tongue and the base of the mouth was missing from her biting on her tongue so much that she had, massive damage in her mouth underneath her tongue. She had bruises on her shoulder, suggesting that she had been forced into the tank opening very roughly. And yeah, why did he put them in the oil tanks? Everybody asks that. Why do they were found in separate oil tanks and everyone's questions are why? He already admitted to why ages ago, but I think everybody's missed it. It was one time he said, I put them separately in the oil tanks because I thought that they would completely decompose in there quickly. He thought he'd get rid of the evidence quickly. No one would ever find them. That's why he put them in there. He wanted to try and say that Shanann had run off with the girls so that nobody would ever find her or the girls. And I feel like he didn't want anyone to find the girls particularly because then they would know that he did that. So he did say, and I think it was only in one interview, that he did say that he put them in the oil tanks because he knew that they would decompose quickly in there and he could easily get rid of the evidence and nobody would know that they were there and no one would ever find them. And honestly, if he'd never told people where they were, nobody ever would have found them. So, and they would have decomposed really quickly in that oil. They already were, and it had only been a few days. So, CW did admit that he shoved both the girls through the hatch when they didn't fit. He was surprised how CC fit better, and he just felt nothing, dropped her in, waited for the splash, heard the splash. He, in his words, through the confession letters, he writes, "Without blinking an eye, I got up with the same energy, walked back to the truck. Bella asked, is the exact same thing going to happen to me as what happened to Cece? He says that he didn't reply. We don't know. Then he proceeds to smother the little 4-year-old girl, for however long, we don't know, because she put up such a fight. And then he shoves her in the oil tank as well. So we know those things for sure. We know for sure that at the scene, the canine handler and officers heard a young child's giggle in Shanann's office while investigating the home, and it was caught on body cam. And it was visibly unsettled everyone in that room. This is the footage of that, and you tell me what you hear.
That's you. They're playing first thing in theater.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What in the world is that? Wow. Go in there and step on that little blue thing and see if that's where that is.
Yeah, it sounded like a kid toy.
It sort of sounds like it.
Something. I heard it.
Did you hear it?
I did.
Sounded like a kid giggling or something, didn't it? Or a kid.
It did.
Look at that pencil. Because all he did was go straight in there. Yeah, straight. Well, we're making note of that.
I heard it. I definitely heard the same thing you did.
Yeah, and then he just sort of started to work. I did.
So we know for sure that the victims in this case are Shanann. She was 34, and she was also 15 weeks pregnant with a baby boy, Nico. We know that the other victims are Bella at 4 years old and Celeste, 3. She'd only just turned 3, by the way, in July. And less than a month later, her father ended her life. I think that's so sad. We know for sure that the digital forensics and Nicole Kessinger are as follows. NK searched many things about Shanann, many things about Amber Fry. Ken Police recover deleted texts. She did a lot of research. We know that her search history is quite rich in damning types of searches. That could definitely pretty much put her at the scene, actually. Why hasn't that been investigated further? We know that she deleted all communications that she'd had with him prior to this happening, texts, call logs, all that sort of stuff. She had tried to delete all traces of her interactions with CW prior to having been questioned by the police. Now, if we want to go back to this Scott Peterson case and we want to talk about Amber Frey, the way that her behaviour was once she found out what was going on with Scott was what you'd typically expect from an innocent party in the whole situation. She went to police. She recorded phone calls with Scott. She provided evidence. She didn't hide. She, yes, her life has been turned upside down and probably ruined, but no more so than NK's life as it is now. I mean, she's had to go into hiding and change her name. And if anybody finds out who she is and what her name is, what are they going to do? Like, they're probably going to be like, what? We got so many questions for you. It's not really any difference. The only thing is that NK is like drumming up. It seems to be drumming up so much interest in her by doing what she's done rather than just coming out. And if she really doesn't want any attention, then she should actually face the public and do the same things that Amber Frey did by having conversations with CW and stuff like that. And then there's the infamous 111-minute phone call that they had the night of the Sunday night prior to Shanann arriving home. Now, that's not uncommon for them to have such long phone calls, but in particular this night, for them to be on the phone for such a long time, it's almost as if they were talking about it. They could have been talking about it. This is just speculation, but they could have been talking about it. NK encouraging him that it's all going to be okay, he can go through with it. And if she didn't know anything about it, he may have been psyching himself up by spending time on the phone with her and geeing himself up. Maybe she was, pushing him to have the conversation about getting the divorce and speeding that side of things up. Maybe she had no clue what he was about to do, and she was pushing him to do the divorce talk and, fighting with him to leave her and leave her. And in his twisted head as the annihilator, he's like, yep, I'm going to get rid of them. Don't worry. And he did. So we have timeline gaps. These are the unanswered questions from myself and also public speculation. So these are the questions I want your help on. What exactly happened between 1:48 a.m. and 5:45 a.m.? I want to know, did Shanann come home and as soon as she got home, they got into it downstairs? At what point did she take off the clothes from the day and get into bed? And how did that come about? Why did she leave her phone downstairs? Did she leave her phone downstairs? Did she even make it upstairs? Did it all happen downstairs? Did it all happen in the basement? We need to stack the evidence up against what we know to answer these questions, but there's so many things that I can't seem to place and put together like a puzzle. In the book by Chris's neighbouring cellmate, he states that Chris did in fact get into it the moment Shanann arrived home and had an argument and a struggle at 2 a.m. And so if that's true, that explains why the canine dogs felt a struggle and heated action downstairs near the play area, and why Shanann's phone and bags were all downstairs and her phone being in the couch pillows. Like, did he strangle her right there on the couch? Like, the whole thing is out of character for her to leave everything where it was. Like, her rings wouldn't be taken off. Did she take her rings off in the fight and say, fine, it's over, and take her rings off and put them on the bench? Like, how deeply did this argument go? What happened? That's the baffling thing for me that I can't get past. What happened in that timeline? Because that would help really piece together what actually took place and why it took place. And if NK is involved more so than what has been laid in, like, is she actually involved at all? Why did it take 35 minutes for Chris to load the truck and leave that morning? What took place for Shanann to have that argument and get out of her clothes? Did they get intimate, or is that just something that he said to try and make it so that, I don't know, somehow looks better for him? And are the letters that Chris wrote to Cheryl, or is it Sherilyn Cadle? True. There's been a lot of accusations coming from a woman named Kim Kaufman that was particularly close with the Watts family for a couple of years post the incident. I think she has cut communication now as of 2021. But prior to that, there was a lot of talk that those letters are fake and that the information that Cadle put into those letters are exaggerated or not true at all. So is the book untrue? Are we reading confessions that aren't really there? Is that just being made up? Because there's a lot of stuff in there that was new that we didn't know that he admitted to, such as putting, drugs in her system. Like, when did that happen? If that's true, how did he do that? When did he do that? In that morning? Like, how did that come about? I want to know about that too. In the footage, I noticed there's a person coming out of the garage. Is that NK? Or is that CW? Who is that person coming out of the garage and walking towards the vehicle that's parked on the street? It does look like a woman, but it could be CW. Who is that person? And if it was NK, then that would explain a lot. One of the funniest things, it's not funny, haha, funny, weird, strange. I was listening to the bodycam footage, and he states in the first bodycam footage when he's talking to the police officer about being out at the oil site. He says the whole time he's alone, he's out there checking this, checking that for one of the dudes that worked with him, and he's saying, I. And then after he talks about after a minute or so being out at the oil site, they're like, so where did you go after that? And he says, we went to the pumping station. So right after he buried Shanann, he says, we went to the pumping station after that. Who's we? Who's he talking about? We who? We, you and another co-worker that watched you just do what you did, or you and NK? Did he meet her there? Was she in the truck the whole time? Was she there that night? Was NK there that night hiding in the basement? There's a lot of footage of that house showing shadows of what looked like NK hiding in the basement and things like that. So, there's neighbours that have said that they saw her car parked in front of his house the following day. So was she in the basement? We also know from toxicology and autopsy reports a lot of things, but there's still a lot of questions and concerns. Like, was OxyContin found in Shanann's system? So CW said in his letters to Cheryl that he had given her that drug twice, but then he retracted that and said he only gave it to her once. So if Shanann was incapacitated, then that makes sense as to why that she didn't struggle. When did he give it to her? At what point did he say, here, have this for your headache? Or did he put it in a glass of water for her? And did they stop mid-fight and he gets her water? Did he bring her water in the morning to wake her up? Like, how did he give that to her? How did he get it into her system? That just bugs me. And, in the autopsy, it says that her death was undetermined, despite his confession. So was she poisoned before the murder? She was very sick all weekend. Did he poison her slowly? Did he poison her all at once? Was oxy found in her system? I can't find it in the autopsy reports. But that's not to say it wasn't in a report. I just can't find it in the reports. So do you know for sure? That's something you guys probably know more than me, because I've done a lot of investigating into this case, and I can't find anything about OxyContin in her system. Claimed in his letters that to Sherilyn Cadle that he gave Shanann oxy, first stating it was twice, and then later retracting saying once. And if that's true, then, like I said, it would give you good reason to know, okay, well, she didn't struggle because she couldn't. There are a lot of suspicions that she may have been slowly poisoned in the weeks prior to her death, because she became really mysteriously ill around the time Chris visited her in North Carolina. And then she was again very sick over that weekend after she got back from North Carolina and went on the trip straight away. So that aligns with the timeline that he describes, that he was attempting to to cause her to miscarry. Because remember, he states in his letters that he was searching and searching for the optimal ways to cause a miscarriage, because he really wanted to, I think he really wanted to end the pregnancy, and he felt that if he could end the pregnancy, he wouldn't have to annihilate the rest of the family, if he could just annihilate the pregnancy. But then that didn't work. So he couldn't annihilate the pregnancy in time, under pressure and under fear of losing NK. He annihilates the family. Other questions I have about evidence handling. Why is there no footage of Chris carrying Shanann? Like, I can see that ring cam footage. There's a lot you can see in that footage, and you can see the driveway. So why can't we see anything from that ring cam footage of the front door of the Watts home? Where is all that? That's what I want to know. Because that would definitely show us somebody walking towards that car, the truck, from the garage that night. And we would know if it was Chris or not. Was there a second vehicle that used to transport her? In his interview, on the porch interview, he drops little breadcrumbs about someone picking her up from the back because they had no fence there. It was some sort of extra driveway in the back due to the building happening. Was there a second vehicle used to transport her from the basement?
Thing out there, like suspecting like if something like somebody pulled in the back, and because we have a driveway back there from the townhomes, but it's so hard to tell. Like there's no cameras in the backyard or anything like that, so it's really hard to.
From the back, I don't know, because there's no surveillance footage, especially when he claimed to load her into his truck before the girls. There's no, I can't see that. And I've watched it till my eyes have gone cross-eyed, and I can't see anything to say that anything larger than something small has been put into the car. It doesn't show anything about dragging or lifting a body that matches her size. If Shanann was already deceased and loaded during that time frame, why isn't she visible? Was there a second vehicle? Could Shanann's body have been transported into another car around the back of the house, and then maybe Chris met that driver out at the site? In brackets, NK, not Chris's truck, and disposed of it separately or in coordination with each other. Yeah, obviously, this raises questions about a possible accomplice or cover-up. That morning, NK asked CW about lyrics for the song Battery. So this is a flag for me, but let me tell you why. It's not because of the lyrics, although the lyrics are a little bit disturbing and do match this scenario. But it's not the lyrics that give me the red flag. It's not what stands out for me for this. Now, hear me out. The timeline of this text is what gets me. Okay, so hear me out. The proper name for oil tanks out there are batteries. Okay? So in my opinion, and let's say this is how it went down, in my opinion, in my theory, let's say NK was with CW at the site, however she got there. Or even if she wasn't there and they simply were having a conversation about what he'd just done and where he'd put the girls, in my head, NK says to Chris, hey, there's a song by Metallica called Battery, isn't there? Because she's learning about him and she knows he loves that band. Like, he's got tattoos of the band on him. He loves that band. He's obsessed with them, right? So he's probably like, yeah, they do. Yeah. And then NK's like, kind of ironic that your favorite band has a song called Battery and you just put your kiddos in the oil tanks or the batteries. I wonder what the lyrics are or what they mean. Like, that's how I envision that he looks up the lyrics to that song. Or she mentions the song and it's like, it's ironic that their oil tanks are called batteries, hey. And then he's gone and looked up the song. So I wonder, what does it mean? What are those lyrics again? Like, I could be way off, okay? I could be way off. But that's the logical conversation that comes up in my head that would have transpired for that scenario to happen. And if that's how that happened, then again, that points more evidence towards the fact that NK knew what happened and what was going on, or she was there. Because he says, she asked what those lyrics meant and what they were, which is strange, right? It's not because of the lyrics. It's because the oil tanks are called batteries. And I don't understand why nobody's picked that up. But what about the blankets and the sheet and the toys I left at the burial site? These items were recovered near Shanann's shallow grave, and they were kind of left there almost carelessly. To me, that suggests that he was just in such a rush. He had not outlined and planned that particular part properly. I don't think that he actually meant I don't think his plan was to do it that night. I think he planned to do it over, like, he had a plan of when he was going to do it, but I think his plans were brought forward, and that's why that was so careless and showed signs of fatigue. He didn't get rid of that stuff. Was the sheet tested for DNA for Nicole? Was there, hair or sweat or blood or any other trace evidence on any of those things that could suggest that NK was there? Did they test that stuff for NK's DNA? I don't think they did. I can't find anything about that. Can you? Was all of the stuff left at the burial site tested properly? That's my question. That's a big question, because that would show DNA evidence that NK was around, especially if the sheet had her DNA. Now, could these items hold the key to a clearer sequence of events or implicate another person? 100%. And these are the things that are really bothering me. The other thing I think that I've got questions around is the paranormal moment. What was that? What was the child's giggle that was heard on the body cam? Was it paranormal? Was it super spiritual? Was it a toy? I mean, we looked around, we saw, them picking things up and stepping on things and couldn't replicate the sound. So that was crazy. There's been other supernatural and paranormal videos out, of when the body cams filming the house when they're searching it on the, third and fourth day, second, third and fourth day. And there's shadows moving around the house. There's you can see a little kid in the background here and a shadow there of a little kid, etc. And has there been additional paranormal activity in the Watts home since the murders? So has it actually been? I know there's been some videos and stuff, but is that people just putting on a show to get more views, or is there actually stuff going on in that house? There's a lot of online forums and YouTube videos have documented new reports of supernatural events. So I want to know, are they true? There's also a couple who bought the house and they allegedly have begun experiencing unexplained things. And they're actually getting a divorce now. And his name is Chris too. So that's weird. Viewers have pointed out that the new couple appeared to be involved in Thrive as well. So that's a little bit strange. That's the same company that Shanann worked for. Kind of raising eerie, emotional, symbolic questions there. Are these just coincidences or signs that something lingers in the house? Why was no formal investigation into these claims? Why has there been nothing done there? Or if one has, why hasn't it been made public? We want to know. We know stuff about his motive and his mindset, but what I want to know is what was it, premeditated murder or psychological collapse? For real. Like, come on, Chris, just tell us the absolute truth. Was it really as planned out as you are claiming, or was it kind of planned out, or was it a thought, or how planned was it? How premeditated was it? Or was it just a complete psychological collapse? Was he influenced by NK and her desire for a first son and a new life? In the text, I should say, in the text messages that she had said to him, in the letters that he had written and also in other confessions that he's talked about, there's a lot of him talking about firsts, that NK was upset that she wouldn't be able to give him anything that was a first, like his first child, his first marriage, his first. And for him, that was like, oh my gosh, I want you to give me something like that. Like it was like a weird, love bombing thing that they were doing with each other. So that's why he found out he was having a boy with Shanann, and he was like, that's what she can give me, that's a first. And I think that's what triggered, because he says in his letters that that's what started him on the path of planning to annihilate his family, was her wanting to have firsts with him. How do you go from Why is that the leap? Why is that? Why is that? Like, oh, no, sorry. You want first with me? Okay, great. That means I have to annihilate my whole family. Just give me a few weeks. Like, how does it go from, like, why can't it be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Unfortunately, that, we can't do that, but I'm going to leave my family and I'm going to, be with you and we're going to have a wonderful life and blah, 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 rather than like, why is it, annihilation? Oh, you want to have first with me? Annihilation. Like, that just, it's just, it blows my mind that that's the direction. There's no in between. There's no gray area. There's no other option for you other than complete annihilation of what's standing in front of you or in your way. How does a person get to that way of thinking is what I want to know. And I want to know with the legal gaps, there's so many legal gaps. I want to know, why wasn't NK charged or subpoenaed again? Like, what evidence does she have that's so clear that she wasn't involved that they have stopped investigating her altogether? Did she go into witness protection, or is it by choice? There's so many differing opinions about this, and there's actually not a lot of evidence to say which way, either way. Is she under witness protection? Why would she need to be under witness protection if he's confessed and it's all out in the open? That doesn't make sense to me, unless the theories of the other theories that are swirling around out there about her being involved in other things that are more dangerous for her. I don't know. And how much did she truly know? And when did she know it? That's a big one. How much did she know and when did she know it? Was she planning it with him? Was she part of the whole thing planning it? Or did she just know that he was going to do something crazy? Like, and when? At what point did she know? From the beginning? Was she part of his conversation in his head from the start? Or did he bring her into it over time? Or was it her idea? That's another thing that we haven't really explored. Was it completely her idea? And I'm pro women. I don't want to blame her. And that's what I struggle with this case, because I don't want to blame another woman for something that a man's done when he has his own mind and he has his own choice and he can make that decision himself. He doesn't have to do what somebody says. Was it her all along? Did she put him up to it, basically? He seemed more than happy to go along with it, though. I don't like the whole blaming just on one person. I feel like they were in it together. That's my gut feeling, is they somehow were in it together in some capacity, whether she was in on it from the start or he brought her into it or whatever. I feel like she knows a lot more than she's giving up, and I feel like she was involved in a way more than what she is telling. She just had that sick love for him and didn't want to throw him under the bus, so she just pleaded the fifth, basically. I didn't know anything and I didn't do anything. That's kind of what she's saying, but not acting as if that's the case. It's not what her actions are saying to me. And why wasn't her phone activity deeply scrutinized, like more deeply scrutinized? Like, she deleted the text, she cleared calls, she admitted to erasing data, but where's the consequences for that? And is there a possibility she assisted or advised him in any part of this crime, even unknowingly? And do you think that she should have faced obstruction charges, or at a minimum a formal court appearance or something? Because the public continues to question whether Nicole's role was minimized to avoid derailing the quick plea deal with Chris. Why haven't we, 7 years later, reinvestigated, reopened this and brought her in? Because, like, if this is what she's done once with someone, like, who's to say that she won't get involved with somebody else and this might happen again? As much as we think that this case is intricate and complicated, it could really be very, very fucking simple. It could be really, really just, he got into this relationship with this chick. They had that sick, crazy love. He decided in his head, they decided together, or he did on his own, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of my family so I can be with her. And basically, that's what he did. And it all blew up in his face because he's an idiot and he thought that he'd get away with it and he would never have to worry about it. And Maybe he thought, I can plan it meticulously, but that plan was brought forward, so his plan was messed up and he got caught. That's what I think. I think he's just an asshole that thought in some dumb, backward way of thinking that annihilation was the only answer. And so he took out everybody, annihilated any trace of his family so that he could start a new life. To me, that's somebody that's not all there. If that's the way that you think, then you have issues. There's something mentally unstable about you and you need help. If you can't see another way out of a relationship other than annihilation, there's something wrong with you. And that's what nobody said to him. Nobody talked to him about it. He didn't talk about his relationship problems with anyone. If only he spoke about it to someone and someone could have said something to him that could have changed the path, that could have woken him up from the dream state of annihilation, you know? I feel like NK wasn't doing that. There was no logical stuff coming out of her mouth. There was nothing logical coming out of her mouth to suggest to him that his way of thinking was wrong. There had to have been signs or things that he said to her that would have, given her some sort of thought like, what's he thinking of doing? If she had no idea that he was planning this, his behavior and things that he said would have triggered things, like we all know what it's like to be close to someone in a relationship. We tell each other things. He would have been testing the boundaries with her. How far can I go and tell her what I'm planning with before she'll run away? He's a narcissist. We may never know everything that happened that night. We may never know. And that annoys me. I want to know. I'm a curious soul and I like investigating things that are really complicated. And this is really complicated for me. So if you know anything, please put it in the comments. If anything that I've said to you resonates, please tell me in the comments. I love reading the comments. I love interacting with you guys. So talk to me. Tell me what you think. But we do know this. Shanann, Bella, Cece, Nico, they deserved more than silence. They deserved more than theories. They deserved more than YouTube channels and podcasts talking about their untimely demise. They deserved life. They deserve the truth and they deserve life. This episode is dedicated to them. I hope that one day we finally understand and know all of the truths as to how and what happened to them. But in the meantime, we can honor them by not giving CW and NK a lot more airtime, romanticizing them and romanticizing the story, and honoring the lives of the people that were taken. So let's honor the girls, Shanann and Nico, and thank you for walking through this with me, for honoring their story and not letting their memory be buried by the lies. In the next episode, we're going to turn the page. We're going to move on to another case, one that's a little bit different, but just as chilling. And I will see you in the next video.